there is a fundamental question I want to ask. And this is really centered around this whole idea of being able to quit your job and become a contractor, but being worried about the risks. Now, of course, before I get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Michael Tabirade, an independent management consultant and founder of the consultancy The Mastery Group. Now, today we're going to explore how to transition from employment to self-employment using the contracting route as smoothly as possible, which will help you build the credibility fast and attract your first end clients with confidence. That was a mouthful. And for those of you who were watching my video yesterday or before this, you will realize that I spoke about my journey, really talking about how I did it and the steps that I took. So this is going to be more about, I guess, a bit more structure as opposed to storytelling. So yeah, hopefully this is insightful for you. So the first thing to do is to start with a plan. I know this sounds very straightforward, but essentially you want to make sure that you're in a position where you have at least, I know it says 6 to 12 months here, but I've advised a minimum of 4+ months. This is crucial. Why do I say 4+ months? Because what I have recognized is that it usually takes about 4 months or so before you can find your next opportunity. Apologies for the noise. Now, with that in mind, you have to be in a position of strength. This looks like you understanding specifically what your expenses look like. So I'm talking about things that are required in order for you to live. Okay, so this is going to be your mortgage or rent. This is going to be your bills, all of this kind of stuff there. So be extremely clear about what that specifically looks like. The second thing is you also need to be clear about what type of area of expertise you're in. This is what we call the niche, not necessarily within the industry, but to you and I. And so this is understanding what type of role you're looking for. So when we say role, what does the market recognize in terms of the thing that you can do? Is it project management? Is it program management? Is it business analysis? Is it something else? Is it product development or product management? You need to be clear about what the client is looking for, what the hiring managers are specifically looking for. And of course, with that, you need to be clear about the type of problem that you solve. So as a project manager, do you focus on digital transformations within Bays as an example, or as a business analyst, do you work within the environment sector? What sort of specific problem are you solving and for whom? Is it private sector? Is it public sector? Is it for teams? Is it for executives? Is it for certain leaders? Whatever it may be, you just need to be super clear. And of course, you need to validate this experience. And the way you validate this is by checking the market, okay? You check the market to see what is out there already. Now, what do I mean by this? This specifically means that you go on things like CV Library, JobServe, Read, Indeed, whatever floats your boat, and you see what the demand specifically looks like. But in addition to that, you put your CV on these different places to see if you get any recruiters call in. Now, of course, you can contact recruiters who contact you or you contact them and have an idea of what they believe the market looks like specifically. Are they getting an uptake? Are they getting situations where it's a bit more challenging? What does it look like specifically? So this is all research you can do. In addition to that, you can also speak to other contractors who can give you insights in terms of what their experience is. And of course, just like with the labor markets, it's very similar to the economic markets as well. So April becomes a time where there is more opportunity to get and find more contracts because obviously people are gearing up to spend money. Okay, they want to spend their money based on the budget that they've been given. Typically, this can come from investment and or from the government. And this is why it's important to check things like the spring budget or the autumn budget so you know what sort of funding is being allocated to different areas or what the interest looks like. This may give you a bit more of an idea. So we've covered that. The next thing we want to look at is building a client pipeline. Okay. Now, this is quite important because essentially what you want to do is put yourself in a situation where you're talking to as many people as possible. What do I mean by this? Now, of course, this specifically means that you need to be able to not only just apply for things online, but you need to have your CV or portfolio present somewhere. You have to. Because if it's not present within a right marketplace, you're not going to get any opportunities. And so we want to put our CV on things like CV Library. This is something that I use quite a lot, and this is where I got my callbacks. Sometimes I may use something like public sector resourcing, where again, This is the trusted sort of like site for recruitment for contractors, and therefore there is an opportunity for you to get more business. But because they're dealing with loads of different people and loads of different end clients within government, they are slower to get back to you. So you want to speak to these people, have as many conversations as possible. You also want to leverage the previous experience, that the previous relationships that you've had with ex-colleagues, ex-hiring managers, contractors you used to work with, all of that kind of stuff there. So this is how you start to create a pipeline. If you do get people messaging you, but you're not available for whatever reason, in this instance you will be, but if you're not, you would still message them back in good time within 24 to 48 hours, quite promptly, and you basically say, hey, I'm not in the market at the moment. However, it'd be great to be kept up to date with future roles, and it'd be great to have a meeting at some point to talk about what opportunities are available once I'm ready, or whatever it may be. Or you can set it in advance. Or if you are available, you set up a meeting straight away. You send them over your CV. You say you want to talk to them. They'll ask you questions about what sort of roles are you looking for, what's your experience, all of that kind of jazz. So you have to be conversational by nature. Now, I'll be very honest with you, and this is an experience that I have experienced, okay? It's not necessarily with everyone else, but I feel like we're in a situation now where the relationship aspect with recruiters is dying a little bit, okay? I feel like COVID did something, okay? It was very strong pre-COVID, and during COVID as well, to a degree, and then it just started to dwindle a little bit. Now, of course, I wasn't a contractor pre-COVID, but I did have conversations with a few people here and there. The point being made is it's slightly different, so you have to be able to put yourself out there and talk to individuals, so you have the opportunity to actually see if there are any sort of like things in the market that may suit you. You need to be your recruiter's favorite. Okay, you need to stand out. And of course, when it comes to your CV, your LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff there, it needs to stand out a bit. Of course, you want to be in a situation where actually, if you don't want to start your contracts now, okay, and you see an opportunity to work outside of IR35, okay, so basically you're taxed under your corporation, then maybe you want to take that as your side gig. Okay, you do that outside of work, because that's perfectly fine. So with that in mind, you may find these opportunities in places like Juno, maybe even CV Library itself, speaking to these different recruiters, talking to your current workplace. Would they allow that? That's an interesting one. They probably won't, but maybe there are other sort of like adjacent organizations that will be happy to bring you on as a contractor outside. And sometimes you don't even need to say any of this stuff, okay? Because it's perfectly legitimate, because again, you're working within your business or within someone else's business. And of course, this is where agents come in. Agencies or consultancies will act as the limited company, and you just act as the subcontractor, and they deal with all of the paperwork as well, provided that you have your own accountant. So that's something to think about as well. Now, I've written here bridge offer. And what do I mean by this? There are some instances where actually you don't necessarily have to go through the traditional routes. And all it really requires you to do is to have some sort of offer in place that allows people to get a bit of a taste, and then the process can happen. So I haven't personally done this myself, but I've spoken to people who have done this, where they have had some sort of workshop or some sort of talk or some sort of assessment, and essentially that has provided so much value to the point where the individuals are like, actually, we need to bring this person on board. And so they go through what's called a mini procurement, or whatever it may be known as, in order for them to be signed onto their books. And essentially they become a consultant for that organization. And so there are opportunities where you don't have to do it the direct route all the time. You can do it if you offer some sort of free offer initially, and you get the opportunity that way. Is this a guaranteed way? Is this a robust way? I can't really say. But in this instance, the point being made is you have to have your core approach, which may be relational by nature or applying for stuff online. And then you have to try other things that may get you opportunities as well. This is the very nature of having a consultant mindset. You have to solve your own problems as well, not just your end clients. And so, moving on, let's move into this whole idea of setting up your systems for stability. Now, in a nutshell, and I'm not going to go through all of this stuff because I feel like it's quite a lot, but essentially, you want to make sure that number one, you have a legal entity set up if you're working outside of IR35. And again, you can set up a limited company for I think about £14. You can speak to an accountant, they'll probably charge you about £100 to do it for them. And if you give them, I think it's like some sort of access code via HMRC, they can deal with all your accounts for you. Again, getting an accountant is another thing. They may charge you each time, which may be £200 to £300 at each time. It may even be every single month, depending on what your setup is. It may be an annual fee as well. So there's something to think about. Again, there's also making sure that you have the right insurances in place. So this is looking at things like professional indemnity, liability insurance, IR35 insurance, etc., just in case there are organizations and yourself who actually are under the wrong tax code. And it's an interesting situation because really and truly, since 2017 to 2019, from a public and or private sector, it's really down to, again, the I guess the individual and or the organization to determine the status of that contractor. In other words, do you see yourself as somebody who is essentially replacing another 9 to 5er but on a contract? Or do you see this person, i.e. you, as somebody who has a legitimate business and can work when they want, deliver when they need to against their contract? They can hire other subcontractors. They can utilize their own resources. They are expense for via their accountant and all that kind of stuff there. Like, is it independent? Okay, is it independent? And so these things are really important to bear in mind, especially when it comes to thinking about getting insurance. You also want to make sure that you have certain tools in place. So for example, a business bank account, you may use something like Tide. I actually like Starling, I'm not going to lie to you. So I use that for a joint account, and it's really great when it comes to buckets and stuff. I may think about using Starling Business in the future, but for the moment I use Tide, which works perfectly fine. There's no issues with that as well. And you could probably check details in terms of the nuances between the two. You also want to make sure that you have the different types of software and systems available. So maybe it's Microsoft Teams, maybe it's Google, depending on the environment that you're within. Maybe you want to use Toggle or Clockwise to basically track your time, okay, when it comes to delivering each day. Maybe you want to use Outlook. What sort of devices are you using? I mean, do you need to use a Mac? I use a Mac. But again, these are all things to think about to ensure that you have things set up. And of course, you also want to make sure that you templatize and productize things as much as possible. So for me, being in the whole program space, I'm going to make sure that I have, project plan templates. I'm going to have risk and issue log templates. I'm going to have project brief templates. I'm going to have a whole array of different stuff so that when I do come into this place and I ask you, okay, do you have a template available? It's all ready to go. Okay, so think about all of this stuff. And this is why it's important to know what role you're in and what methodology you align yourself to as well. So the next thing is really centered around transitioning gradually. Okay, we don't want to rush this process. And look, if you watched my story yesterday, okay, I know I've got these numbers here and everything else, but if you listened to my story yesterday, I didn't do any of this stuff. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. But I don't want to give bad advice, okay? So you can take this as you will, but everyone's journey is going to be different. The point being made is you want to be in a position where you've had enough savings, okay, at least 4+ months savings, in order for you to be in a position of strength so that you feel confident if you were to leave. So this really comes down to you, what you want to do. Now, of course, it says here you can work on your business 20% and 80% on your job. It depends what type of consulting you're doing. If it's contracting, it's going to be slightly different. It's not going to be applicable. And so with that in mind, what I would say, at least anyway, if you were not looking at that advice, if it wasn't applicable to you, is to make sure that you speak to recruiters. They're your best friend. And you also speak to an accountant. Why? The accountant will give you a breakdown of how much you may potentially be paid, if you were to do a certain type of contract for X months. But you need to do the research to understand what day rate that may look like. And so this is why you need to look at the market and understand what that looks like. Sometimes it's looking through reams of pages, noting down specifically what the rates are, okay? Or you could speak to an agent who can tell you what those rates are themselves. But they will ask you first. So there's a bit of back and forth there. The second thing is the agent will give you an idea in terms of what's available on the market, as I said previously before. And if you want to apply for stuff via these different job boards, okay, you can do. That kind of highlights the demand. So this gives you an idea whether you're in a space to jump or not. Now, I've said this before and I'll say this again. Between January and March, that's April, is always the best time to start jumping into any sort of contract. So, as I'm shooting this on the 19th of Feb, this will be the right time to do this kind of stuff. Now, of course, it doesn't mean you need to drop your pants and do everything, okay? The point being made is it needs to make sense for you. It needs to make sense for you, because if it doesn't make sense for you, what's the point? Like, what is the point? There's no point rushing for rushing's sake. So assess your situation. Look at your financial situation. Look at the potential future that you may embark in. Okay, these are all different things to bear in mind. I've got this other thing about shift to 50%, 50-50 as income grows. Go full time where your business covers 70%. Okay, blah, blah. We don't need to talk about that because I'm not talking heavily just about consulting, but I am talking about a possibility of contracting as well. But yes, these rules make sense. Does it actually sort of like occur in reality? Not all the time. Not all the time. So I just want to be very transparent and straightforward when it comes to that. The next thing is to make sure that you master self-employment. Okay, so what I mean by this is making sure that you have the established set of attitudes before you shift. And sometimes shifting with the right established set of attitudes is just taking action. Okay, what do I mean by this? So for me personally, when I shifted into this whole sort of phase, I understood that I needed to develop the entrepreneurial skills so that I can feel confident to do what I'm doing. Because when you jump into contracting for the first time, it's a little bit nerve wracking. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, like if you're rubbish or they don't like you for whatever reason, then you're gone. You know, 0 day notice in many instances. You know, public sector organizations sometimes like to do 1 week notice, 2 week notice, sometimes even 4 weeks notice. If you agree to that, that's perfectly fine. If you don't, that's also okay. You can negotiate terms if need be. But the point we made is it's entrepreneurial by nature. So you have to bet on yourself. Like, are you willing to do what it takes to get in a position where you are potentially going to be making more money, okay, if you manage your situation right? But also, it means that you have to be your own finance manager and you have to deliver value. Because if you don't deliver value, then bye bye. You're not going to be hanging around for too long, okay? So this is a really important thing to bear in mind. The other thing I was going to say is that you need to make sure that you set the right level of boundaries. What do I mean by this? So going into contracting or consulting, sometimes you can overdo stuff. Okay. Oh, I need to impress. I need to do this. And actually you're busier. Okay. You're busier than what you did before. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because you have to be a professional at heart. Deliver the value that you're going to deliver. That means though, if you're working remotely, working in an office at their site, the client site, or your own office, if you're outside, then you need to make sure that if stuff needs to be done, don't delay. Just get it done, okay? Or set some time to do it. So prioritize your times appropriately, and you'll start to understand what the rhythm looks like specifically for you moving forward. The next thing is to think about avoiding these common pitfalls. So the first thing is underpricing. So this is an interesting one because for me personally, when it came to the whole pricing situation, I had no idea how I should charge. Okay. So how did I work this out? I spoke to different contractors to get an idea of what they were charging. They wouldn't necessarily tell me, but they would say, I reckon you're around the range of this to this. That's what they would say. And then I would validate that against the market to see specifically if that made sense. And then when speaking to recruiters, I would test things. They'll be like, oh, how much are you looking for? And they may even say a price. And I may say, no, this, which is £100 more, just to see what they're saying, because obviously they want margin. You have to remember this. And so here's a general rule of thumb that I've kind of remembered. And the only reason I know this is because, I've been a workforce lead within a government department before, and I've worked very closely with some of these recruiters before. And so I have an idea roughly of what the ranges look like. So, if you're executive, that's £1,000 plus a day. So executive/director. If you're looking at like a senior manager position, then you're looking at anywhere between £600 to £800. If you're looking at a middle manager position, you're looking at anywhere between £400 to £600, and anywhere below middle manager is going to be less than £400 a day. So this is a day, by the way. This is inside or outside, but of course subject to VAT and subject to, what sort of like setup you have, whether you're an umbrella or PAYE under inside or limited company. I think there's even sole trader as well for outside of IR35. But again, you can confirm that limited company is the best setup, and you can also speak to your accountant as well when it comes to this stuff. So when you have those ranges in mind, it gives you an idea. Now, if this isn't a strict rule, of course, it depends on industry, it depends on where you are, etc., etc. But this gives you an idea in terms of what that looks like specifically. The other thing is making sure that you consistently contact your recruiters, okay? Or you consistently reach out to different people. Now, it doesn't mean you need to be doing this every day and you're hustling and, oh, I need to speak to this, but no. Like, have some sort of like, what's the word? A decorum in that way. But you need to be in a position where you are telling people what you do, what your situation is. Don't be shy about it. Don't not say anything. And you'll realize that actually people are quite helpful. If you're a cynical person, then that may be difficult to grasp and to hold on to, because I was in that situation myself. But you have to recognize that actually, if you don't open your mouth, nobody's going to know. As my brother-in-law once said and my sister once said, closed mouths don't get fed. It's that simple. So tell people your situation, tell people you're looking for stuff, whether that is a month before your departure, 2 months before your departure, when you've actually departed, when you've actually started, let people know. But a trick that I say a trick, something useful that worked for me in the first, I would say, 3 years of my contracting journey was basically ensuring that a month before, a month and a half before, that I was very appreciative of being within that working environment, and actually just put it on the cards at the table. If funding were available, I'd be very happy to continue my tenure. Not sort of like leading it to chance. Like, why? And so if I get a sense of vibe that actually they're not quite interested, whatever it may be, then I can keep it stepping. But of course, they're invested interest to keep you as long as possible, whether there's funding or not, based on the fact that they don't want to mess up anything that hasn't been delivered already. So you have to bear all of this stuff in mind, okay? Now, moving forward, question I want to ask you is, what's the biggest fear holding you back from self-employment, specifically as a contractor or independent consultant? Is it financial uncertainty, a lack of clients, or something else? I would love to know below so I can get an idea and maybe even talk to that stuff even more so. And again, if you are a business leader, if you are working within a 9 to 5, specifically within the program or project space, then I'd love to have a conversation with you if you need support in your current environment, or if you want to transition into new employment, whether that is contracting or new role. So again, if you want to have that conversation, then you can book a conversation below via the links below. Okay, perfect. The seventh thing I want to talk about is building credibility. What do I mean by this? Now, this is an important thing. I've spoken about the PAR model again and again and again, and I urge you, and I'll say this again, I urge you to go and watch the video centered around that sort of like setup. I think it's centered around CVs or whatever it may be. I did this like 2 or 3 weeks ago, so you can check it out on my YouTube channel. Hopefully there'll be a link at some point. But you want to be able to repurpose wins. And so when we're thinking about the PAR model that I talk about, the R part is tangible results. If you have not done this already, go back for your experiences and really sort of like write down specifically what sort of tangible wins you have produced or contributed to. It doesn't have to be you, because sometimes it's hard to define what that looks like, but you have to be clear about what your role was in relation to this stuff. So for example, did you save money? Did you make money? Did you improve a process by X%? Was there great customer feedback or a better way of doing things? These are all things to bear in mind, okay? You also want to be able to collect testimonials. Now, how do you do this as a contractor or consultant? Well, what I specifically do is a week or 2 weeks before I'm jumping off, and sometimes I do this in middle of my contract or tenure, I message my colleagues or whatever it may be, and I ask them 3 simple questions. So, what did I do well? What could I improve on? Is there any additional sort of advice, okay, or suggestions for me to improve my work? And that's it. So that gives me the feedback I need. So that's feedback, obviously. But then on top of that, I'm like, I'd be very grateful if you were to provide me a testimonial. I give them a LinkedIn link, but if they don't want to go on LinkedIn, because some of them don't like to do that for whatever reason, I give them the option of just writing it to me. I can still use that information. So yes, bear all this stuff in mind. Don't forget to get testimonials, etc., etc. The other thing is you can share this stuff on social media, such as LinkedIn or whatever medium makes sense for you. Obviously, I'm building my authority here on YouTube. I'm trying the best to do that as best as possible. So this is one option or one approach you can take, but there are many different approaches you can take. And so as we move on, I want to talk about a bonus tip. Sorry, I said that really weird because it was taking long. So again, here's an example transition timeline. So again, first 1 to 3 months, you want to validate your idea, save money, and land 1 to 2 clients. What do I mean by this? Within a contracting context, all this specifically means is you want to be in a position where you're clear that the role and job that you're saying that you want to do as a contractor actually exists within the marketplace. And you want to give yourself some time to actually validate this, okay? Now, looking at the market could take a day, but it's long to do. If you want to do it properly, maybe give yourself 3 days to do it. You note things down on a table, track it, etc., etc. Like, you have to look at the whole market for your industry. Don't be lazy. Like, I need to stress this. Sorry, let me put this on this view. You need to be so on it in terms of understanding whether you have an opportunity or not. Because if you don't understand if there's an opportunity or not, you're kidding yourself. You're jumping into a situation that could be extremely dangerous for yourself, especially if you've never been in this entrepreneurial phase in your life before. So check the market, scour it. Look at one sort of like job board as an example. Don't look at LinkedIn because it's a bit too all over the place. You can use LinkedIn for jobs, but maybe use something like CV Library so you can see the numbers and all that kind of stuff there. And just scour the market to see, okay, this is what it looks like for the project management space. What about the industry? What does that look like? So don't waste your time when it comes to that stuff. So make sure that you have the ability to get recruiters contacting you, because if you can confidently start getting recruiters contacting you, especially around the right sort of time, then fantastic. You've won because you're in a position of strength. Then you want to be set up in a way where you start to understand specifically what is required in order for you to start transitioning. This is a big one. So really what I mean by that is, what does the negotiation look like? Do I have to quit? Is there an opportunity for me to hang on just in case I get severance pay because they're cutting people? Like, what does all of this stuff look like? How is my manager going to react? How am I going to speak to those individuals? Can I get something within a certain amount of time? Do I have an emergency fund that's big enough in order for me to do this stuff? So bear all of this stuff in mind. This is for your first 1 to 3 months. Then for the next 4 to 6 months, by God's grace, you would have found something. But again, if you haven't found something, this is an opportunity to start thinking about what things can I utilize from previous employment, okay, especially if it's aligned, so that I can use those templates and systems moving forward. What do you need to think about from what I'm going to call a niche specific standpoint, let's say a management standpoint, versus a consulting standpoint? What do I mean by this? As again, program manager, the sort of systems and things that I need in place is understanding, okay, what sort of document assets do I need for the program or project cycle? So templates essentially. Okay. What sort of other sort of like books do I need to support the development of what I'm doing? Is there any sort of like summary information or notes that I need to support my sort of like, again, my delivery? Okay. From the consulting side, what do I need there? Okay, maybe I need something like AI or a note-taking assistant or something centered around, I don't know, tracking my hours and all this kind of stuff there, a proposal template, a contracts template, etc., etc. So there are two different things that you may need in order to set up your system. And of course, if you're successful in the third or fourth month, then you can start employing this stuff as well. And of course, when it comes to, again, negotiating rates, I've spoken about this already, so I don't need to talk about that again. But again, month 7 to 24, this is making sure that whether you're in contracts, still looking for contracts or not, you're getting a clear idea of what your niche looks like. You're refining it, okay? So you're going full time with this contract, you're refining it, you're getting better, you're understanding specifically what to say in certain situations, what not to say in different situations. You're taking time to, again, journal, write notes, and understand, what does this look like? This is all really important stuff, so don't take any of this stuff for granted. Again, you guys are lucky, okay? I say this again and again and again. I think there was, there is, websites out there that talk about contracting, but it's not something that is exciting or engaging by nature. So for me to talk about this stuff so openly and freely is a great resource, in my opinion, at least anyway, because I didn't have this. I had to sort of like sheepishly ask people and see what happens. And by God's grace, I had someone who was willing finally to just say what they needed to say. So really take heed of this advice and information, but basically put it in the frame and context of your life. That's what I would say. And so moving on, we want to summarize, okay? So I'm not going to go through all of this stuff. You can read it for yourself, okay? But the point being made is, do not be afraid to take action. Like, don't be afraid. But don't do it blindly. Do it with a sense of validation and understanding of what the market looks like, aligned to your expertise and experience. And if you feel like you don't have enough experience, then get more experience and or get the vocational qualifications. Simple. Don't make it complicated. Don't try to rush the process. Don't try to force it. It needs to make sense. Make it make sense. Now, as I've said before, if you want to work with me because you're a project or program leader or manager or anything of those sorts, and you want to improve your current career situation, then feel free to click on the link below. We can have a conversation. Again, serious people only. I don't want to play or talk to people who are not serious. Anyway, if you want to see more videos centered around, again, portfolio careers, contracting, consulting, the whole shebang, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.